and today we're speaking with candidate for Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District, and to learn more about their background, experience, and approach to public service. Hello, and welcome to the program.
David, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so let's get to know you for the folks that may be meeting you for the first time, whether it's out in the public or right here on this program. Let's get your name, who you are, where you're from, what you like to do day to day on your spare time.
Well, thanks again for having me on the show, David. For those who don't know, my name is Paul Wassgren. I'm running for Congress for Tom Tiffany's open seat here in the 7th District of Wisconsin. I am a fifth-generation native of the Northland and I was born and raised in Ashland, Wisconsin.
Okay.
My grandparents owned the Mountain Valley Cheese Factory for many decades in Bayfield County. So my roots are very deep in the Northland.
Yeah.
I just love it. I grew up shooting and fishing and boating and skiing, of course, in the winter, and all the great things that northern Wisconsin has to offer us.
That's right, a true Wisconsinite.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we need to know why are you running for Congress?
Well, David, that's a very important question that any prospective public servant should ask and answer before getting into the meat grinder that is politics these days.
Right.
As I travel around the Northland, I see some pretty distressing signs of economic loss, right? We've seen factories close. We've seen fewer and fewer opportunities for young people.
Right.
Our greatest export right now is our children. And I come from a very large family, David, so I have families scattered throughout the northern counties of the 7th District. And I want to be sure that our young people, our younger generations, have the same great experiences and the same warm future that I enjoyed as a kid growing up in Ashland, Wisconsin in the 1980s.
Yeah. All right. So before we get into more questions, or the rest of the questions here, what's one life experience that shaped how you see public service today?
Well, thankfully, I've had the opportunity to learn from a number of folks who've been in public service. I grew up in the shadow of a good family friend, John McConnell, who himself was a public servant. He worked as a speechwriter and advisor to a number of presidents and vice presidents. I think he grew up 2 houses down the street from me on Chapel Avenue in Ashland. In addition, my great-grandfather was involved in politics. He never sought public office as an elected official, but he was appointed to a number of positions and was very active in the state party here in Wisconsin.
Right. For those that like something simple, what do you think the job of a U.S. representative is in plain terms?
Well, to put it very simply, it is an advocate, right? We send in our elected democracy an advocate to Washington to be our spokesperson, our representative in the halls of Congress. And that's why I think I'm the best man for the job, right? I've been a professional advocate as a corporate attorney for over 20 years.
All right. Well, you know what? We're going to get into some priorities in the district here. So, first off, what are your top 3 priorities for District 7 and why those?
Well, as I said before, the reason I'm running is to help revitalize the economy in the Northland. And as I travel throughout the 26 counties here in the 7th District, that's the common theme that I hear from folks. They're very concerned about economic opportunities. People don't have the same career-supporting job opportunities that once existed in our great state. And I think that's a concern throughout the United States, but especially northern Wisconsin, right? As you travel along Highway 2 in the counties that I know so well, Ashland, Bayfield, Iron, and Douglas counties, you just see a lot of economic distress. And so that has to be item number 1,
Right.
and indeed it is for my campaign. The flip side, though, of economic revitalization is affordability. Not only do people not have enough income, they're very worried about the income that they do have and stretching those dollars, whether it's at the pump or at the supermarket. And I'm sure we'll get into that, but fixing the affordability crisis in the Northland, indeed throughout the United States, is item number 2. And as part of that, I'd like to look at reforming our legal system. And that feeds into both of the things that I just talked about. But again, coming from a legal background, I can say with some confidence that our legal system is in desperate need of reform.
Right. Okay. So if you can deliver one measurable win for the year, what would that be?
Well, let's start with that last economic point. So if I am successful at getting onto the Judiciary Committee and making some reforms to our legal system and eradicating or at least substantially reducing the number of frivolous lawsuits in our country, and we see evidence of that all over the place, that would have a very meaningful impact on all Americans, but especially in the Northland. We would see insurance rates decline dramatically. And so we would address affordability right then and there.
Right. Okay. Well, you know what? We're talking about the economy, jobs, and the cost of living. What is driving the higher cost for families here, and what can Congress realistically do about it?
Well, there are several factors. Let's start with the disastrous Biden economic policy. So, day one, Biden reversed the Trump energy policy. So, to his great credit, now that President Trump is back in the Oval Office, he has restored his energy policy. And so we have seen gas prices and fuel costs come down dramatically. That, of course, feeds through the economy. It impacts the price of goods and services up and down throughout our economy. So that is a key aspect of the affordability crisis. So we're well underway to fixing and repairing the damage done by Biden. But in addition, I just talked about the cost of frivolous lawsuits on our economy. If you think about it, as many as 90 cents out of every dollar of revenue that gets fed into the insurance premiums is paid out in legal fees or settlement costs. So that is a key piece of affordability,
Yeah.
right? If you think about the typical family of four in northern Wisconsin, they're now paying health insurance premiums of over $2,000 a month. That's the top line item in any household budget. Since when in America is health insurance a luxury good,
Yeah.
even above and beyond the mortgage and the rent payment, not to mention the car payment?
Right. All right. So part of the economy here and small businesses. How would you support small businesses and Main Street downtown in rural communities? I mean, there's a lot of them are starting to dry up and disappear. How would you help in that?
And we see that throughout the Northland. The best thing that federal government can do to support small business is stay out of their way. I think if you look at the last 50 years, I'm 49 years old now. If you look at the last 50 years or so in the United States, we've seen the federal government get in the way of small business more often than they have benefited small business. So that's job number one, do no harm. Or if I may put it differently and paraphrase Ronald Reagan, one of my favorite presidents, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. And if you think about the dairy industry and certain other legacy industries in the Northland, that is true more often than not.
And talking about that, what are your views on the tariff and trade policies, and how it affected Wisconsin, including the farmers? They were felt pretty hard this year, and consumers.
Well, to his credit, Donald Trump has imposed a very aggressive negotiation strategy with our friends and our foes alike. And as he looks at revising our tariffs and some of the tariff rates with foreign nationals, I think that puts a temporary thumb on the scales of the economics. So it's a start. It's certainly not everything we need to do to revitalize our economy,
Right.
but I'm generally in favor of the steps that the president has taken. And I know that some people in our district and perhaps throughout the country as well have been adversely impacted. But again, the goal is to revitalize our economy, and part of that is to incentivize folks here in the United States to restore manufacturing jobs rather than see those go south to Latin America or overseas to Asia and places like that.
Sure. And talking about, employers here, how would you help balance the economy growth while keeping regulation reasonable for small employers?
Well, again, government is usually the problem, not the solution to the problem. Now, we appreciate we have to have some regulation, and perhaps more in certain industries than in others. But I think it's fair to say at the federal and state levels here in Wisconsin, we've seen too much regulation, and that's why Wisconsin is no longer competitive. That's why the factories and the jobs have gone overseas, or in some cases, to other states.
Right.
So my mission going to D.C., and I promise our constituents I'll be the fiercest advocate yet if they send me to D.C. That's a great honor and a great responsibility. But it will be to help restore America as a more competitive venue for job creation.
All right. Earlier back, you started talking a little bit about the healthcare insurances and stuff like that. Let's get into rural healthcare and hospitals. So, rural clinics and hospitals are struggling right now. What federal steps would you support to stabilize them?
Well, what we have to do, to paraphrase Senator Ron Johnson, of whom I'm a great fan, we have to undo the damage done by the Affordable Care Act. Obamacare has done nothing but cause the cost of health care to go up, in many cases dramatically, like I just gave as a statistic. A typical family of four is now paying over $2,000 a month for premiums. And of course, we've also seen a diminution in the quality and the availability of that healthcare. So again, government has gotten into an industry and made a mess of it. So we have to unwind that damage. So again, less is more when it comes to federal regulation. The one thing that I would say that the federal government can and should do, though, is incentivize people to bring in jobs and factories. Same thing would apply to hospitals. And we have some great hospital networks, including, of course, the Marshfield Clinic, which now has multiple locations throughout the Northland. But through the right combination of deregulation and tax incentives, we can create more opportunity to build and expand the existing facilities that we have and bring in and attract new ones.
Right. So part of healthcare, this has been in the news lately again here. How would you address mental health, suicide prevention, substance abuse in rural areas?
Well, let's start with substance abuse. So again, to his credit, President Trump and his administration have really sealed the southern border. And so we have seen a dramatic reduction in the amount of illegal narcotics being smuggled into the United States. During the Biden years, we saw a huge increase in that supply, and therefore the price of those went down. So they became more accessible to young people, frankly, Americans of any age. And that's not good. Again, I grew up in the 1980s, a wonderful decade.
Right.
I remember vividly and fondly Ronald Reagan's wife, Nancy Reagan, saying, just say no. Unfortunately, drugs obviously become a major problem in the Northland, and not just in one or two counties, but throughout the Northland. And so at the federal level, I think what we need to do is support and enhance the enforcement efforts of the DEA and other agencies that are responsible for reducing the importation of illegal drugs and narcotics, especially in our communities. With regard to mental health, now that is, I think, in contrast, much more of a local and state issue. And so as a prospective federal employee, I would certainly warmly support our state and local officials. But I don't know that we want the federal government getting involved in that industry.
All right. So I got one more question here for the healthcare issue here. What is your approach to Medicare and Social Security? What should change, if anything?
Well, I'm not sure we need to change anything. Most of us throughout our careers have paid into that. That is not really an entitlement. We call it an entitlement, but really that's something we've paid into as if it were a 401k or a Roth IRA.
Right. So
Americans are entitled to that because they've paid into it. I think if we change the rules of the game now, that's just intrinsically wrong and frankly a breach of contract. So there are plenty of ways to cut down on our federal expenditures, but that is not one.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to move on in, because we got some important things, that what makes Wisconsin great here. We're going to touch a little bit on our agriculture, forestry, and land stewardship, which a lot of people are proud of here in Wisconsin. What do farmers in number 7 tell you their biggest challenges right now?
Well, as I've traveled throughout the northern district here of Wisconsin, what I hear consistently, David, is concern about the uncontrolled gray wolf population. And to his great credit, our current congressman, Tom Tiffany, has introduced a bill which has been passed at some level, still needs to earn some support in the Senate. But really what has happened is that some unelected judges in California have made some decisions that impact our wildlife management here in the Northland, and I think that's intrinsically unfair. No one knows better than we how to manage our own natural resources.
Right.
And we are very unique, right? If you go to Washington, D.C. and start talking about the gray wolf, they look at us like we're from Mars.
Right.
I think folks in the big cities don't know what that is. But farmers are truly impacted by that. And again, I'm from little old Ashland, Wisconsin, so a lot of my family and friends are in these industries, and they are impacted. Certainly our hunters, of course. We just finished deer season a month and a half back. A lot of folks have been really gravely impacted by this menace.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to take some steps, as Tom Tiffany has started, to restore at the state level our ability to manage our own natural resources.
Right. What is some of your farm bill priorities? Crop insurance, conservation, markets and beginning farmers?
Well, once again, I come from a laissez-faire economic background, and that's very consistent with the Republican Party in which I am running as a candidate for the 7th District. Less is more when it comes to the government. Let me give you an example. So, as I said at the start of your show, David, my grandparents who are now deceased owned the Mountain Valley Cheese Factory for many decades. And why did they get out of that business? Because the federal government got into the dairy industry and they ruined it. So because of the Vietnam War and some of the policies associated with that, farmers, dairy farmers in particular, closed their doors and milk prices shot up through the roof, squeezing the profitability and the margins within the cheese business. And so my grandfather was forced to sell to one of his competitors just to survive. And I think by analogy, that's what we see in the industries today, right? So Wisconsin certainly has this wonderful backbone of these legacy industries, including dairy and other agricultural industries. I don't think we really want the federal government getting in our way because more likely than not, they're going to overshoot the mark or undershoot it, and we're just going to have a mess on our hands.
Sure. All right. Well, let's move into some forestry because Wisconsin's also known for paper here. So, how should federal policy support Wisconsin's forestry and paper economy?
Well, you're right. That's a legacy industry. If you think about where I grew up in northern Wisconsin on Lake Superior, that was just ringed with the multimillionaires who made their money in timber industries. And related products. So these days, we have a very careful way of managing our forestry and our natural resources. But to answer your question directly, David, I think we need federal policy that will encourage investment in sustainable products. So let me give you an example. There is talk now, both in Washington and in Madison, of creating a sustainable aviation fuel factory in Hayward, Wisconsin. We need policies that will support that, not oppose it.
Right.
And that's going to create a lot of wealth for northern Wisconsin. The factory itself would be about $1.5 billion. So let's think about northern Wisconsin and all those jobs that we're missing out on. Mm-hmm. That goes a long way, David, to restoring some of the vitality in our economy there in Sawyer County.
Right. All right. Talking about a little bit of sustainability here. Where do you stand on renewable fuels, bioenergy, like ethanol and biodiesel fuel?
So one of the benefits of the program I just mentioned, if we can create the right incentives and deregulation to create it, that could easily pivot into biodiesel as well, right? The aviation fuel is almost interchangeable with biodiesel. So I think as a nation, we are very skilled in creating innovative solutions to problems, right? Including, of course, some of these green energy spaces, but they have to make economic sense, right? And I think we've had to push back on some of those. So while I'm certainly in favor of new technologies and sustainable fuel sources, I think we have to be sure that they make economic sense and we don't have the federal government subsidizing things that don't make sense in their own right.
Right. Talking about technology, as we're going to talk onto this, what are your plans to improve broadband accessibility and affordability across rural areas that still do not have that infrastructure?
Well, a lot of us do suffer from that, especially as I travel around the district. So I think the solution there is a private market solution. And when we think about Starlink, which was in the news again today, thanks to Elon Musk and the generous offer he made to the good people of Venezuela, given what they're going through, I think we have the solutions. I think we just have to incentivize private industry to do that. And again, if we deregulate and we create certain tax incentives, I think the free market will take care of this. And one of the policies at the federal level that I have supported strongly for the last decade is the Qualified Opportunity Zone program. And I think if you really dig into what the QOZ program is, we have found a rare example of where the federal government can get it right and create an environment in which private entrepreneurs can harness the benefit of this federal tax incentive and still do the right thing. And by the way, that tax program had bilateral support, bipartisan support back in 2017 and was finally signed into law by President Trump as part of the 2017 tax reforms. And here in northern Wisconsin, we're seeing really good concrete examples of things being built and businesses being created, jobs being created as a direct result of that federal policy.
All right. We got about 9 minutes left here. I'm just going to go into the next categories, one question at a time, and then we'll go back if we have a little extra time here. So education and workforce here. How would you help strengthen technical colleges, apprenticeships, and workforce training in locally?
Well, again, at the federal level, the job for which I've applied is a federal position what do we do? I think what we do is we diminish or eradicate the Department of Education because over the 40 or so years of its existence, it has done nothing but diminish standards throughout the country. And once we do that, we'll have more money to send back to the states and to the local communities, and they can make decisions about how to govern their own educational system. So when we talk about technical colleges, that's something that I think is a terrific opportunity here in Wisconsin. We have people are so concerned about AI. I don't know how AI would ever replace skilled electricians, plumbers, and other trades folks. And I think a lot of folks who aren't interested in pursuing a four-year education can do very well by going to trade schools. And so let's make sure that we have the money directed in the right places for education. And I don't think it belongs in Washington, D.C. in a bureaucracy like the Department of Education, David.
Very good. All right. We're going to touch a little bit on public safety here and border policy here. How should we support local law enforcement while protecting civil liberties?
Well, that's a very important point. And as you know, I come from a legal background, having practiced for over 20 years. So I'm always quick to say, David, that we come from a rule of law background, right? Our society is governed by the rule of law. And so I fully support law enforcement as they operate within the four corners of their jurisdiction. And to his great credit, President Trump, who has an affirmative duty to enforce our immigration laws, has done exactly that. And over the course of just this first year of his administration, he's effectively sealed the border and restored law and order to this country. And I think he's going to continue to do exactly that. Now, if people are critical of our immigration laws, they should direct those criticisms to Congress, because it is incumbent on Congress, not the president, to reform our immigration laws. So I am very supportive of law enforcement. I'm very supportive of the president's efforts to seal the border.
All right. Talking about environment and energy here, how do you approach conservation, clean water while keeping farms and industries viable?
Well, we do need to look at infrastructure here in Wisconsin, David. And as we look to attract some of these major industries like data centers and perhaps even some of the legacy industries like timber and so on and so forth, or an aviation fuel plant, we need to be sure that we have the infrastructure to support all of that, including, of course, access to clean water. We also desperately need lower cost energy production in this state. And that's one thing that will limit, unfortunately, Wisconsin's ability to compete with other states where the cost of energy is lower. And so I know that Tom Tiffany, when he's our next governor, will be looking at exactly that. And so we do need to look at not only renewable forms of energy, but traditional forms of energy as well. In Ashland, Wisconsin, this is neither clean nor efficient, but they're burning sawdust. And the cost, the mill rate there is extremely high in terms of what retail consumers are paying.
All right. So one of the other questions here, the federal deficit keeps growing. What will you cut? What will you protect, and why?
Well, it's a big concern, and Senator Ron Johnson is not the only one to be concerned in Wisconsin. That's something that a lot of the constituents have talked to me about, again, with the spirit being we don't want our children and grandchildren to be bankrupted by the decisions that our parents have made. So what are we going to cut? Well, I've got three things that we can cut: fraud, waste, and abuse. What we're not going to cut, Medicare, Medicaid, and entitlement programs like we've talked about. But apparently, the fraud, waste, and abuse in our society is incredible. We saw a taste of that last year with Doge, and in recent weeks, we've now seen, just in Minnesota alone, billions and tens of billions of dollars of taxpayer money being very poorly deployed. I'll just put it politely, David.
All right. Well, we're going to get into the next one right here because we've got a little bit of time left here. So how will you stay accessible? Town halls, office hours, being in the district, where can people find you, get a hold of you?
Well, I think that's an important point because as a representative, you need to have access to your clients. And my clients will be every single man, woman, and child living in this district, whether or not they voted for me. And so what I've done as part of my campaign, this will evidence how serious I am. As you know, I'm from Ashland, Wisconsin, but I set up a campaign office in Wausau as well. And so I split my time now between northern and southern parts of our congressional district, which is very large. But that's just one small example of how I am going to be accessible to the constituents. But of course, like any other congressman or congresswoman, we'll have town halls, and we're going to have access and phone numbers and emails and probably virtual Zoom meetings as well for folks to attend. So I don't think that'll be a concern for folks. I'm, as a lawyer for over 20 years, I've always made myself available night and day weekends, weekdays to my clients, and that will be no different going forward.
Sure. All right. Next one here, because we'll have a little bit here. How do you handle criticism in high stress decisions?
Well, criticism is the backbone of the legal profession, so I feel like I'm pretty well equipped to go to Washington and hurl myself into the wood chipper that is the House of Representatives. How do I relieve my own stress in my private life? Well, I've always maintained a healthy exercise and diet to the extent possible. Of course, I love cheese curds too,
Right.
but I think a little physical fitness goes a long way towards stress relief, David.
All right. So we're going to go back here just a little bit here. How would you support a balanced budget amendment? Yes or no?
I think we do need to balance our budget. It cannot happen overnight given the situation that we have right now after COVID. And we haven't had one since the 1990s, as I recall.
Right.
But I think we need to get back to that sort of fiscal responsibility, and I'm supportive of those efforts. And again, once we cut out the fraud, waste, and abuse, and we bring in some additional revenue from tariffs, and we grow our economy, I think the future looks very bright from an economic point of view, David.
All right. Got one more here. Name an issue you think you can work on with another party, a specific outcome you both would chase.
Well, let me give, again, a great example of the Qualified Opportunity Zone program. So although that was begun in 2017 and had bilateral support, it is still very much in the news. The Big Beautiful Bill, of course, incorporated some changes to the Qualified Opportunity Zone program. But the concept is one that we should all be able to support independent of our political affiliation, right? We want to make America great again. We want to revitalize our economy. And here in northern Wisconsin, we desperately need to revitalize our economy. So I would be very happy to work with members of the other political party to enhance and improve the Qualified Opportunity Zone legislation.
All right, very good. Well, we're coming down to the end here. Why should someone decide to trust you with this job?
Well, it's an important decision, but again, when you're picking out a lawyer or a doctor, you got to go for the most experienced, the best educated, and the hardest working, and I think I qualify in all three of those categories, David.
All right. Before we close out here, where can voters learn about you, meet you, follow your campaign?
Well, I hope that they will, and they can do so easily at my website. My campaign website is www.paulwassgren.com.
All right. Well, that just about wraps it up here. Paul, thank you so much for coming down today in Marshfield and being on this Get to Know program, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, David.
All right. And you've been watching Get to Know, produced by Marshfield Broadcasting. This interview is part of an ongoing effort to provide voters with the general information about candidates running for office. Marshfield Broadcasting does not endorse any candidate parties, political parties. Participation in this program does not simply mean endorsement. To watch this interview again or watch other candidate programs, watch us online or on Marshfield Now, channel 990, and throughout our streaming platforms. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next time on Get to Know.